For Bonnie and Clyde.
Richard H. Klein.
For Camelot.
Katharine Ross has been married to Sam Elliott for over 40 years, a miracle by Hollywood standards. But before Sam, there were 4 men, 4 rings, and 4 devastating divorces that left her extremely heartbroken each time. Each man was convinced he could hold a woman like Katharine Ross, but none of them could. Now, we finally know the truth about what broke those marriages and why Sam Elliott was the only man who could give her the lifelong partnership she had been searching for. Katharine's enduring marriage to Sam Elliott. By 1978, Katharine Ross had already achieved everything that an actress could hope for. She had received an Academy Award nomination for her role in The Graduate, one of the most influential films of its era. She had starred opposite Paul Newman and Robert Redford in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, a film that has never stopped being watched. She was beautiful, famous, and respected by her peers. Sam Elliott, by contrast, was still climbing. He had landed some early prominent film roles and was building a reputation as a reliable character actor, but he was not yet the mustachioed icon that he would later become. He was simply a working actor with a deep voice and a face that casting directors remembered. Their paths had technically crossed nearly a decade before they ever spoke to one another. In 1969, while filming Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Ross was the top-billed star, the woman whose name appeared above the title and whose face sold tickets. Elliot was a quiet background extra with a non-speaking role credited as card player number 2. He stood in the background while Ross delivered lines that would become famous. He watched her work from a distance, and years later he admitted that he was too intimidated and too respectful to even attempt speaking to her at the time. She was out of his league, he thought, and approaching her would have been presumptuous. So he kept his distance, and the moment passed. The true catalyst for their relationship came nearly a decade later on the set of a film called The Legacy, a gothic horror thriller shot in London, England. This time, Ross and Elliott were co-stars, not a star and an extra, and the distance from the Hollywood industry bubble gave them the freedom to talk without being watched. They spent hours together between takes, sharing meals and conversations that drifted from work to life to everything in between. The friendship that developed during those weeks in London became the foundation of a romance that would last for decades. Elliot was immediately drawn to Ross's classic elegance and her intellect, qualities that he had glimpsed from afar on the set of Butch Cassidy, but had never had the chance to appreciate up close. Ross, for her part, deeply appreciated Elliot's humbleness, his calm energy, and the strength that he carried without ever needing to display it. He was not threatened by her fame or her success. He was not competing with her for the spotlight. He simply wanted to be with her, and that simplicity was more attractive than any grand gesture could have been. They began dating discreetly, keeping their relationship out of the tabloids, while Ross navigated the final legal steps of her 4th separation. After 5 years of dating, a stretch of time that gave them both the opportunity to be certain about what they wanted, they married on May 1st, 1984. The ceremony was small and completely private, the opposite of the lavish celebrity weddings that fill magazines and generate gossip. They exchanged vows in front of a handful of witnesses, and then they returned to the life they had been building together. 4 months after their wedding, in September of 1984, they welcomed their only child, a daughter named Cleo Rose Elliott. Instead of settling into the busy Los Angeles social scene, the couple made a deliberate choice to step away from it entirely. They built a quiet, grounded life on a working ranch in Malibu, a property where they could raise horses and gardens, and a daughter without the constant intrusion of paparazzi or the pressure to attend industry parties. The ranch became their sanctuary, the place where Ross could be a wife and mother rather than an Oscar-nominated actress, a place where Elliot could be a husband and father rather than a rising star. Over the decades, they co-starred together in multiple projects, including the 2017 drama The Hero, a film that allowed them to play an aging couple navigating the final chapters of their lives. The irony of playing fictional versions of themselves was not lost on either of them. They had lived long enough to understand what made a marriage work, and they had learned those lessons through trial and error. Elliot frequently notes that Ross is the essential anchor and foundation of his life, and he has said that their bond survived because they were entirely intentional about giving each other space. Ross has described Elliot as the most unwavering, stable, and genuinely grounded person she has ever known. But the woman who found peace with Sam Elliott did not arrive at that peace easily. Before she met the man with the mustache and the baritone voice, she had walked down the aisle 4 times, and each of those marriages ended in ways that taught her exactly what she did not want: the first husband she left behind. Katherine's first husband was Joel Fabiani, a name that most moviegoers would not recognize, even though he went on to build a long, steady career as a television character actor. In the late 1950s, however, he was not a working actor with a resume full of credits. He was an aspiring theater student, just like Ross, and the two of them met while studying regional theater in the San Francisco Bay Area. They were young, idealistic, and convinced that their passion for acting would be enough to sustain a marriage. They were wrong about that, but it took them a while to figure it out. They married early in their youth on February 28, 1960, at a time when both of them were still struggling to find their footing in the entertainment industry. Ross was not yet a star, and Fabiani was not yet the familiar face that would appear on television screens across America. They were simply two young people who loved each other and believed that love would be sufficient. The wedding was small, the kind of ceremony that people have when they cannot afford anything elaborate, and the early days of the marriage were marked by the kind of hopeful energy that comes from not yet knowing how difficult life is going to become. The trouble with the marriage was not infidelity or addiction or any of the dramatic problems that end most celebrity unions. The trouble was simpler and in some ways more sad. The marriage took place completely before either of them had achieved mainstream success or financial stability, which meant that they were trying to build a partnership on a foundation of uncertainty. There were no steady paychecks, no guaranteed jobs, and no assurance that the next audition would lead to anything. Ross was supporting herself through early theater work, taking whatever roles she could find, while simultaneously trying to break into the rigid Hollywood studio system that did not make room for young women without connections. Looking back on that marriage years later, Ross described it with a clarity that only time and distance can provide. She said that the marriage was a clear mistake, not because Fabiani was a bad man, but because they were both too young to understand what partnership actually required. They had married without the maturity that a lasting union demands, and they had married for reasons that had more to do with companionship than with genuine compatibility. Ross did not blame Fabiani for the failure of the marriage, and she did not blame herself. She blamed youth and inexperience, two forces that have ruined more marriages than infidelity ever has. There were no messy public court battles or media coverage when the marriage ended. The reason for the quiet was simple. Neither Ross nor Fabiani was famous yet. The newspapers did not care about a young actress whose name meant nothing to their readers, and the gossip columns did not have space for a character actor who had not yet appeared on anyone's television. They divorced quietly in 1962 after exactly 2 years of marriage, and they went their separate ways without animosity or public drama. Fabiani continued acting, eventually building a respectable career in television. Ross continued pursuing the stardom that was still a few years away. The personal life challenges of that period extended beyond the failed marriage. Ross was dealing with the heavy financial pressure of supporting herself through early theater work, taking jobs that paid barely enough to cover rent and groceries. She was auditioning constantly, facing rejection after rejection, and watching other actors get the roles that she wanted. The Hollywood studio system of the early 1960s was not kind to young women who did not fit a certain mold. And Ross did not fit the mold that the studios were looking for. She was too serious, too intellectual, and too unwilling to play the games that the industry demanded. The marriage to Fabiani had been an attempt to create stability in an unstable life, but it had not worked, and the divorce left her alone again. What Ross learned from that first marriage was deceptively simple. She learned that love alone is not enough to sustain a partnership. She also learned that two people can care about each other deeply and still be wrong for each other. She learned that marrying young before you know who you are and what you need is a gamble that usually does not pay off. And she learned that ending a marriage does not have to be a war. Sometimes it is just an acknowledgement that you made a mistake, and the kindest thing you can do for both people is to walk away before resentment turns into hatred. But the lessons of the first marriage would not protect her from the pain of the second. The man she married next was not an unknown actor struggling for work. He was a rising star, and the fame that came with his name would destroy their marriage in ways that neither of them could have anticipated. The marriage destroyed by fame. Katherine's second marriage was to John Marion, a Hollywood insider who lived completely outside the acting spotlight. He understood the industry because he worked in it, but his face was not on magazine covers and his name was not in the gossip columns. He was the kind of man who could attend a studio party without being mobbed for autographs, and for Ross, who was just beginning to feel the weight of public attention, that anonymity was part of his appeal. They were introduced in Los Angeles during the mid-1960s, a period when Ross was finally starting to book her very first television guest roles after years of struggling in regional theater. She was not yet famous, but she could see fame approaching on the horizon, and she wanted someone beside her who would not be threatened by it. They tied the knot on May 2nd, 1964, in a ceremony that was larger than her first wedding, but still far from the lavish productions that would characterize her later years. The early days of the marriage were stable, even happy, as Ross continued to build her career one guest role at a time. John Marion was supportive, or at least he appeared to be, and Ross believed that she had finally found a partnership that could withstand the pressures of the industry. Sadly, she was wrong about that assumption, but the collapse of the marriage would not be anyone's fault in the way that infidelity makes one party clearly responsible. The collapse would be the fault of fame itself. The marriage directly collided with Ross's sudden meteoric rise to global fame. The roles that she had been chasing for years finally came, and they came all at once. Her shooting schedules for major studio films pulled her away from home for months at a time, leaving John Marion alone in Los Angeles while she worked on location. She was not neglecting the marriage on purpose. She was simply doing the job that she had spent her entire adult life trying to secure. And that job demanded travel, long hours, and a level of commitment that left little room for domestic life. The Graduate changed everything. When the film was released in 1967, Ross went from being a working actress to being an international star almost overnight. Her face was everywhere. Her name was on everyone's lips. She received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, an honor that should have been the culmination of all her years of struggle, but that instead became another source of pressure. The nomination meant more interviews, more public appearances, and more time away from home. The woman who had married John Marion hoping for stability had become a woman who could not stay in one place for more than a few weeks at a time. The divorce was finalized in 1967, the exact same year that The Graduate was released and turned Ross into the star she had always wanted to be. The timing of the divorce coinciding so precisely with the peak of her professional success has led many observers to conclude that the marriage was destroyed not by any flaw in either person, but by the sudden lifestyle change that fame created. Ross was traveling constantly, meeting famous people, and attending glamorous events, while John Marion remained in Los Angeles, living a life that had not changed at all. The distance between them, both physical and experiential, grew too wide to bridge. Ross has spoken little about this marriage in interviews, choosing instead to focus on the lessons she learned rather than the details of what went wrong. But those who know her well have said that the divorce from Marion was the first time she truly understood the cost of fame. She had wanted success so badly that she had never stopped to consider what success would take from her. The answer, it turned out, was her marriage. The husband who had supported her through the lean years could not survive the years of plenty, and Ross was left to navigate her newfound stardom alone. The personal life challenges she faced during this period extended far beyond the divorce itself. Ross had to adjust overnight to aggressive paparazzi who followed her every move. She had to adjust to intense press junkets that consumed days of her time, as well as the overwhelming psychological pressure of a sudden Academy Award nomination. The nomination should have been a triumph, but it felt like another obligation, another demand on her time and energy. She was expected to be grateful, to smile for the cameras, to perform the role of the happy starlet, even as her marriage crumbled behind her. She did her best to comply, but the effort exhausted her. When the divorce was final and the award season ended, Ross found herself alone in a way that she had not anticipated. She had left her first husband because they were too young. She had left her second husband because she had become too famous. The pattern was beginning to emerge, though she could not see it clearly at the time. She wanted a partnership that could survive both struggle and success. But she had not yet found a man who could walk beside her without being overshadowed by her light. The third marriage would not solve this problem either. Instead, it would teach her something new about the limits of her own patience. The third marriage to Conrad Hall. Conrad Hall was not a struggling actor or a Hollywood insider working behind the scenes. He was a legendary, highly respected cinematographer whose name carried weight in the film industry. He had an artist's eye and a technician's precision, and he would go on to win 3 Academy Awards for his work behind the camera. When Ross met him on the active set of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969, she was immediately struck by his intensity and his focus. He was not trying to impress her with charm or flattery. He was just trying to capture the film's iconic visuals, and Ross was simply part of those visuals. She was one element in the frame that he was composing with care. They met directly on the set, where Hall was serving as the director of photography, and Ross was starring as Etta Place, the woman caught between 2 outlaws. The chemistry between them was not romantic at first, at least not obviously so. It was the chemistry of 2 artists who recognized each other's commitment to the work. Hall respected Ross's professionalism, and Ross admired Hall's ability to see the light and shadow in every scene. By the time the film wrapped production, that professional respect had deepened into something more personal. And on June 1st, 1969, immediately after filming ended, they officially tied the knot. The timing of the wedding, coming so quickly on the heels of the film's completion, suggested that both of them believed they had found something extremely special and lasting. Ross had divorced John Marion just 2 years earlier, and she was eager to move on. Hall had never been married before, and he approached the union with the same careful attention that he brought to his job. For a brief period, the marriage worked. They understood each other's careers in a way that Ross's previous husbands had not, and they gave each other the space that artists need to create. But the same careers that had brought them together eventually pulled them apart. Both Ross and Hall possessed incredibly demanding, high-profile film careers that required traveling to opposite ends of the world for location scouting and filming. Hall would spend months in remote locations, chasing the perfect light for a director's vision. Ross would be shooting in another country, sometimes another continent, with schedules that left no room for visits or phone calls. The constant physical separation eroded their daily connection, turning what had been a passionate union into a long-distance arrangement that neither of them had signed up for. The marriage did not end because of infidelity or any of the dramatic causes that make headlines. It ended because 2 people who loved each other could not find a way to be in the same place at the same time. The film industry consumed them both, and the industry did not care about their marriage. Productions had budgets to meet and release dates to hit, and Ross and Hall were expected to be where they were told to be when they were told to be there. Saying no to a job was not an option for either of them, not when they were both at the peak of their careers. They separated in 1973 and finalized their divorce in 1974, 5 years after they had married. Despite the split, they maintained a high level of professional respect for one another within the industry. Ross never spoke ill of Hall in interviews, and Hall never blamed Ross for the failure of the marriage. They had tried, and they had failed, and they had accepted that failure with a grace that is rare in Hollywood. When they crossed paths at industry events, they were cordial, even friendly. 2 people who had shared a chapter of their lives and then turned the page. Overwhelmed by the constant spotlight and exhausted by the demands of fame, Ross made a deliberate decision during this marriage that would have seemed weird to most actors. She began turning down massive studio scripts, including a starring role in The Towering Inferno, one of the biggest blockbusters of the decade. The role would have paid her a fortune and cemented her status as a leading lady. She turned it down because she wanted to seek a quieter personal life, and she knew that saying yes would mean more months away from home, more pressure, and more of the fame that had already cost her marriages. The decision to step back from the spotlight was not an easy one. Ross had worked her entire life to reach the top of her profession, and walking away from opportunities that other actors would have begged for felt like a kind of surrender. But she had learned something about herself during her marriages to Joel Fabiani, John Marion, and now Conrad Hall. She had learned that success without companionship was hollow, and that no amount of money or fame could compensate for coming home to an empty house. She wanted to find a man who could be her partner, not her competitor, and she was willing to sacrifice her career to find him. The fourth marriage, however, would not give her that partner either. The man she married next seemed to offer everything that the previous three had lacked. The reason that marriage ended was more shocking than anything that had come before. The fourth marriage to Gaetano, Tom Lisi. Gaetano Tom Lisi was not an actor, a director, or a cinematographer. He was a crew member working behind the scenes in film production and transportation, the kind of person whose name appears in the credits, but whose face no one in the audience would recognize. For Ross, who had spent years married to men whose careers demanded as much attention as her own, the idea of a husband who worked quietly and stayed out of the spotlight was deeply appealing. She met Lisi on the set of the satirical thriller The Stepford Wives in 1975, a film shot in Connecticut that would become a classic of its genre. Ross was playing the lead role of Joanna Eberhardt, a woman who slowly realizes that the perfect wives in her new town are actually robots. Tom Lisi was employed as a set technician and chauffeur, driving actors and crew members to locations and making sure the logistics of production ran smoothly. They married on August 19, 1974, during the timeline of the movie's production schedule, a fact that surprised many of their colleagues who had not even realized they were dating. The wedding was small and unceremonious, exactly the kind of low-key event that Ross had come to prefer after the public nature of her previous divorces. She believed, perhaps naively, that marrying a man who worked behind the camera would protect her from the pressures that had destroyed her earlier unions. The immense gap in their professional lives, lifestyle expectations, and public visibility created friction almost immediately. Ross was a movie star. Lisi was a crew member. When they attended industry events together, photographers ignored him and swarmed her. When she received scripts and offers, he received nothing. The imbalance that Ross had hoped would bring her peace instead brought resentment, not because Lisi was a bad man, but because the world treated them so differently that it became impossible to ignore. Ross's primary focus during this period was shifting completely away from the Hollywood machine. She was tired of the parties, the premieres, and the constant pressure to be seen, photographed, and written about. She wanted to live quietly and to escape the industry that had consumed so much of her life. Lisi, who had never experienced fame the way she had, could not fully understand why she wanted to run from something that most people would love to possess. The emotional distance between them grew, and by 1978, while Ross was filming in the United Kingdom, the marriage had become deeply strained. They separated emotionally long before they separated legally. The divorce was officially finalized in 1979, 5 years after they had married. Unlike her previous divorces, which had ended with some measure of mutual respect, this one left Ross feeling disillusioned in a way that she had not anticipated. She had tried marrying a famous actor, a Hollywood insider, a legendary cinematographer, and a behind-the-scenes crew member. None of them had worked. The problem, she began to suspect, was not the men she had chosen. The problem was the context in which she had met them. Hollywood marriages, even the best ones, were shaped by Hollywood pressures, and those pressures had broken her every time. This era marked Ross's final disillusionment with typical Hollywood romance and the superficial industry structures that she had spent her entire adult life navigating. She decided to transition toward a deeply private, rural lifestyle, one that would prioritize peace over prestige and quiet over visibility. She had not yet met the man who would share that life with her, but she was preparing herself for him. When Sam Elliott finally entered the picture, not as a star or a crew member, but as a man who wanted the same things she wanted, Ross was ready to walk away from Hollywood for good. The 4 marriages that had failed were not failures at all. They were lessons, and she had learned every single one of them. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like and subscribe to our channel for more updates.